I was going to ask you,
Yeah.
imagine if you could make a clone of yourself.
Oh, God.
Like if somebody approached you and said, yeah, we can clone you, we'll just print out another you.
Yeah.
Well, would you? And if you did, what would you make it do?
This is a no-brainer. It would do my work. It would go teach students, ungrateful students who make no academic progress whatsoever, and then I would just be doing my things, right?
But what if the you that came out of the printer wanted to do your thing and just told you, well, you go to work and earn the money.
Well,
I'm too busy doing things.
I guess the propriety is the question here. I would own the clone, right?
But if it's impossible to tell the difference between you and the clone, who owns who?
Yeah. Damn.
You could do like a job share, maybe. Get away with that.
Yeah, I knew a husband and wife teacher who did that.
They cloned each other.
They each worked half time at the one job.
Genius.
Made it work on the one income, and they each worked half the time, and then they didn't work at all in the summer. It was brilliant.
If they cloned themselves, then they'd only have to work a quarter of a job.
That's right.
It just goes on and on.
The benefits. Or you could clone your spouse, and then your spouse, just don't worry about it for yourself. Then your spouse goes off as the spouse clone goes off, works the job. Then you get to spend all that time with your lovely spouse.
Is that how it works, or have you just invented patriarchy there? Yes, that's we create a woman and we send her out to work and then we spend the money. That's how it works.
Reimagined it. Yes.
Hello and welcome to the Two Real Cinema Club. I am James Rosica.
I am Andres Lorente, and each week on the Two Real Cinema Club, we, or our clones, talk about an old film and a new film, and we draw some comparisons and some contrasts between the two. Are we clones, or are the films we're watching clones?
Ah, yeah, it does beg the question, is it possible to tell or not?
Precisely. Can you tell I am not a clone? Uh-oh. Whose computer was that? Was that mine or yours? I heard a bing.
That wasn't mine. Was that...
It's my clone's computer.
So this week we have watched Mickey 17, the new, rather delayed, much heralded, widely advertised feature from Bong Joon Ho, his follow-up to Parasite. And we will be comparing it to 1982's science fiction noir classic, Blade Runner. Difficult to compare any film to 1982's Blade Runner. I don't know. We'll talk about that a bit later on. Yeah. My first question is there an Oscar curse, though?
Ooh.
Mickey 17 has not done particularly well, and we'll probably talk in a few minutes about why that might be the case.
Yeah.
But a lot of the coverage that I've read have all talked about the Oscar curse, the big problem that when you make a movie which wins a big load of Oscars, your next project is doomed to failure.
Wow.
I was looking it up, actually. I'm not completely sure that it's a real thing. Michael, now, is it Cimino?
Yeah, Michael Cimino. Yeah.
Cimino or Cimino? Or
I think it's Cimino.
Cimino, okay, right. So he made The Deer Hunter, one big with that, then went on to make Heaven's Gate. Okay. Chloe Zhao went on to make Eternals after winning the Best Picture Oscar. I mean, there are a few examples you can come up with of people who crashed and burned following their big win.
Yeah.
But actually, it's not a universal rule. So I don't think Bong Joon Ho can accept that as an excuse.
I think it's more that audience expectations are higher, and it's just hard to match the expectations. You've made a really good film, and then you make one that's just not as good. I think it's just seen as being so off the mark compared to your earlier bar that you set for yourself. I want to make a quick Soderbergh comparison because for two reasons. Sex, Lies, and Videotape was huge, right? I don't know, did very well at Sundance. It came out as like one of these early independent films in the 80s and really caused a stir. And then he made Kafka, I think, right afterwards, which is this black and white thing. It's pretty interesting. It's not a great film. And it was just so much different from Sex, Lies, and Videotape. And he's for all of his talents, he's really got a wide range of interests, and he's made so many different films. So ultimately, he ended up being a good filmmaker. And the reason I wanted to talk about him in particular is because a few years ago I watched, he recut, I don't know if he used his own name or not, but he recut Heaven's Gate. Cimino's film that you mentioned, and he just shortened it and he made it quite a bit more coherent. And I've seen the full film, which is I think in some ways it's magnificent. I really like it because it's really a period piece. It really gets the American West or Americana as it's growing. Does that very well in terms of look and feel and all that. But it is too long. I think it's 3 hours. And
oof. Asking
American audiences in particular to spend 3 hours sitting through a kind of a thoughtful, steady, film that doesn't rush anything is too big an ask. But the shorter version does work quite a bit better. So maybe Steven Soderbergh could have just made Michael Cimino's film again and avoided the slump.
Maybe Steven Soderbergh could get some work shortening all of the films that we think are far too long. I can send him a list tonight, actually, of films that he could start editing down.
Yeah.
When do you think he could begin?
I've got a couple in mind, too. Well, it seems to be the ones that we always end up watching, too, for some reason. Boy, too long.
Well, speaking of films which are probably rather too long, we'll talk about Mickey 17.
Yeah.
So, Bong Joon Ho previously directed The Host, Snowpiercer, that weird train film that was made into a TV series. Parasite was his last picture, and a big one.
Yeah.
This film, as far as I'm aware, I think they shot it from August until December 2022.
Okay.
So it's been in the can a long time. And it's been delayed and delayed and delayed. And sometimes that delay just happens because there's a lot of post to do, or it's just not the right time to release it. But sometimes it raises a little bit of a red flag.
Yeah. What year was Parasite?
Was that 2019, I want to say?
Check pretty quickly. I felt like it was more recent than that. Let's see, I've got him up. 2019. Oh, you are so good. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a professional on this podcast. Dr. Razika. Parasite is 2019. You are absolutely right. I feel like I saw it later than that. It probably was released abroad first and then came here a little later. But that's 6 years. Woo, you're right. Okay.
Well, before we entirely slam Mickey 17, based on a book by Edward Ashton, his debut novel called Mickey 7. They needed to add another 10 Mickeys to turn it into a film. Shall I tell you the story of Mickey 17?
No.
And then we can get the knives out.
No. Please, no. Only because I want to mention one thing.
I was
very optimistic about this film for one reason. I noticed that Edward Ashton's only credit, other than something called Tales from the Bridge, or maybe that's the name of his podcast. He's a podcaster. That's all he has for credits. So I just felt like, hey, wait a second. Someone has set a new, very low bar for the guys at the Two Reel Cinema Club. We are, in case people listening to us don't know this, we are podcasters.
It's difficult to tell from listening to the podcast, but we assure you it is true.
And we certainly have some scripts too. So, as I don't know, uncomfortable as it was watching this film, I really had this just dose of optimism and good cheer right afterwards when I realized, hey, that guy's a podcaster.
If they can make a movie out of his book, then surely. Right. Now that all the agents are paying very close attention, let me tell you the story of Mickey 17. So this film is a satirical sci-fi drama adventure. That was the box that I put it in. Oh. It's set in the year 2050. Not very far away. Mickey Barnes is one of a crew of a spaceship that has arrived on the ice planet Niflheim, hoping to colonize it. But Mickey is different to the other crew members. He is the ship's designated expendable. A copy of his brain and a recipe for his body are kept on file so that he can be printed out again if he dies. And die he does. His status is the lowest of the low, and he is inevitably selected to be exposed to radiation, exposed to the new planet's viruses, exposed to any other potential danger that the crew may come across. So now, on his 17th iteration, Mickey is left for dead at the bottom of a frozen ravine at the start of the film. But when he survives, guided to safety by the planet's inhabitants, a species of giant woodlice dubbed creepers, he makes his way back to the ship to find that his replacement, Mickey 18, has already come out of the printer. So now there are 2 of them. And this is strictly not allowed. What will happen? Which of the 2 Mickeys will have to be sent to the incinerator? What will his girlfriend Nasha think of this duplication? And will Mickey's new knowledge that the planet's indigenous inhabitants are intelligent and friendly change what the colonists and their gung-ho MAGA-styled leader Kenneth Marshall plan for the planet Niflheim?
Ooh. How did I know that you were going to be asking some questions at the end?
Funny that, isn't it? Eh? Peculiar. Funny that. So, we will ring the spoiler bell in a minute. But first, in case you haven't guessed from our earlier conversations, this film is not very good. But I think it's interesting to talk about films that turn out not very good because there's a very talented team behind this film.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think it's fascinating to try and figure out, well, why didn't it turn out well? Why is it not good? It's certainly not for lack of talent. I do have a theory about why this film is not good, which is summarised in the opening few seconds of the film. But I'm all ears in case you have a different theory.
Of whether it's good or why it's not good. It's a leading question, isn't it?
Well, see, I don't know if I'm putting words in your mouth. Do you think it was good?
No, this is not a good film. This was painful to watch. It was kind of relentless. It just sort of, I don't know what the running time is. I should check before I start complaining because maybe it was an hour and a half.
It's only 2.25 hours. It feels longer to me.
Okay. It was too long, as we say often. I again, it's one of these cases where there's probably a good story in there and there's a good film that you could make out of the material, I think. But I don't think the direction is very good. I don't think the acting is very strong. And I don't think the script is that interesting either. And it's a shame because there's some really cool things in here in terms of the replications or is that what you would call him? Making the expendable and reprinting his body.
Yeah.
It's a pretty cool idea. But I think the premise is good, which is too bad because I don't think the film is good. And I think that's it. I think it's just, it's underdone, which is surprising because, as you said, it's 3 years of probably working on it and planning it before filming it. And then another 2.5 years before it got into the theaters. Which lends you to think, maybe there was a problem editing it and maybe it either the material wasn't there and it couldn't be made into a good film, or they worked really, really hard and maybe they cut things that should have been in there. So it's a kind of film where I'd like to know what was on the cutting room floor because, I think that it has promise in the premise, but boy, it was difficult to watch, and I think it could have been at least 30 minutes shorter and not been any worse for the wear.
I agree. It just seemed like the simple premise seems like an absolute gift, and then they utterly failed to capitalise on
it.
My theory for why this film didn't turn out well in a single image is the opening image of the film, because the film opens up after the credits. The first thing you see is a man's face entirely caked in white powder as he blinks wildly, wipes his face off, struggling to form a coherent thought.
Yeah.
And if you ask me, I think there were probably just a few too many faces covered in white powder trying to put a coherent thought together during the making of this film. And that's why we've ended up with 2.25 hours of kind of strangely incoherent filmmaking that lurches from one idea to another, not really able to settle on any one coherent notion.
And ultimately, that film's not it's the opening image, but it's not the opening image. It's actually the end of Act 1, right?
Yes,
they go back and retell the whole story, and then you see that scene play out a little differently. So it's a roll of the dice, really. I think it's not that safe to start with that image and then sort of take us backwards and then bring us right back to that image. So I think for me, it just screams exposition instead of just starting the story right there, which might have been good, and just going on with it. Instead, it's sort of the film starts. You get about, I don't know, it's 15 minutes maybe of the backstory, And then you come back to this moment, which is really it's a perilous moment. I love the fact you called them wood lice. Where did you get that? There's no wood on the planet that I can tell. But they do look like big wood lice, I guess. I thought they were like what we call roly-polies or pill bugs here.
Oh, cute pill bugs. Yeah, right.
They look kind of like that. But, it's a very perilous moment. So instead of just getting right into the story and maybe dripping a little exposition later on, they sort of take you back, give you his whole story about why he's there. And I think another thing is that backstory about them being criminals together returns on the other planet, which seems so unperilous. Like the person who who's seeking revenge on them, Mickey and one of his buddies, are so far away. There's just no threat. It's very strange the way they did that. I think because there's this one set of antagonists that's just completely out of the picture, and you don't even think about them, and all of a sudden they kind of return maybe the midpoint of the film, but.
Let's ring the spoiler bell.
Yeah, please.
We're venturing into spoiler territory. We'll ring the bell over the icy wastes of Niflheim. Here we go. Here's the bell now.
And I have to say, spoiler bell. Spoiler bell is an interesting term because we're not spoiling the film. The film is pre-spoiled, right?
It spoils itself for you. I checked my watch. That initial setup, it's almost exactly 30 minutes. I think it's 30 minutes in after you've had a flashback and all of the backstory, and then we return to that opening moment again. It's pretty much 30 minutes.
Yeah, I was lost early on. And there's one thing that is, I think the biggest problem is there is constant narration in this film.
Yes.
There's a voiceover telling you the whole story from the very beginning, and I'm assuming that was in the script initially. Podcasters writing scripts. Talk. Anyway, I think that, you could do away with that and it would save you a lot of time. I think the film probably would have been significantly shorter. But I think you just would have been seeing the story as opposed to hearing Mickey tell you the story.
It really kind of adds nothing at all.
Yeah.
And it's distracting because the accent that Robert Pattinson has chosen for his lead character, Mickey Barnes, is just this very weird kind of strange comedy accent that he's using. I find it, every time he opens his mouth, I find it tremendously distracting. Yeah. It's a really weird voice he's chosen. So having to listen to this kind of peculiar nasal caricature voice every time he's explaining to you exactly what you're already watching on screen is another moment that just reminds me, oh yes, I'm watching a film, I'm not watching I can't really get into the story.
And he has to have a couple of voices because he plays primarily like two different characters. So they're a little bit different. And I would nod to Robert Pattinson a little bit here because I think he actually does a pretty good job acting. It's quite complicated because he's two versions of the same person, and these are versions that have gone through some sort of tech uploading and downloading. And again, I don't think the material's that strong either. I thought he was pretty good. I mean, I thought he did a commendable job with what he had to deal with. But you're right. The voicing's different, and then you're wondering, well, should you get more voice? Should you get maybe some narration from Mickey 18 would have been interesting because you'd have that perspective too. He's got 18 different personalities to work from, right? I mean, it's they all seem different. Like 18 and 17 are not twins by any means. They are quite diametrically opposed. And you've got the Nasha character who's presumably been in love with him since Mickey 1. Is that what he is? Or Mickey 2?
I think so, yes.
Which is interesting too. And there's no attention paid to that. Like, what's it like having this? And why do you love the same person if they're a little bit different? Do you really love them equally? Or is she just really into Expendables? Or is there something particularly physically captivating about him? I don't know. I mean, and that's something that's just completely overlooked. And that, again, that's an interesting aspect that gets no attention.
I think when a film hasn't been successful, it's useful to go back to those really traditional, straightforward, screenwritery type questions. So, the first one, whose story is it?
Yeah,
it was clearly thought out. It does seem a lot like it is definitely Mickey 17's story. That the 17th iteration is at the center of the story throughout. He's the guy that we're supposed to be following. We don't particularly like Mickey 18. He's kind of a little bit bitter and nasty and unpleasant and violent. Mickey 17 is our guy, and he's the guy that the film is named after, so they do understand whose story it is.
Yeah.
But the second question, which is the one that really trips it up, is what is it about? Because I think this film is trying to just be about too much. It's about way, way too much. It's about so many things that it just can't really concentrate on any of them for more than a couple of minutes. So, it kind of is sort of about class struggle and the way that some people's lives are treated as if they are expendable.
Yeah.
And it's sort of about corporate overreach, but it's also sort of about like Trumpism and a sort of political satire, and it's sort of about colonialism, and it's sort of about the debt spiral, and it's sort of about modern slavery, and it's sort of about environmentalism, and there's all these sorts of different things that he can't quite figure out which one he wants to look at and which one he wants to explore.
Yeah,
I do understand that a part of a characteristic of his work is that he does have these big changes in tone. He tends to veer from one thing to another quite suddenly, and that's part of the entertainment of his films. But in this case, I think we're just sliding all over the story without really feeling like we're getting anywhere.
Yep.
So it ends up being a frustrating watch. What's it about? Figure it out.
Yeah.
Choose one thing. That's what I want to say.
And do it well. Yeah.
Yep.
The thing that's most interesting to me is a droplet in this film. It's a tiny moment, and correct me if I misheard this or misunderstood this, because there's not a whole lot that I really understood about this film, but there's one point where Mark Ruffalo's character essentially comes out and says they're creating a white race planet. Did you get that at all? Yeah. And I think,
like his like second in command has this little religious symbol, which looks a lot like a swastika.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So for me, that's the most interesting thing in the film. And it gets, as I said, it's like a droplet. If you're smart enough to fall asleep during this film, you're going to miss that entirely. But I think that's a really interesting idea, is that someone is wealthy enough or politically engaged or connected enough to go off and settle a planet. And there are some characters of color in the crew, I guess, but Ruffalo's character comes right out and says it at one point. It's very quick. And that's the kind of thing that maybe the editing, changed somehow. But he says that, white people are going to settle this planet, and you're assuming that they're going to have lots of expendables working for them. I think this is a fantastic idea to explore right now in cinema. I think it's there for the taking, and they drop that ball big time. I mean, it's just not. That's it. That was the one moment, and so you're and when you switch tone so much, that could be a menacing moment. That's a menacing idea. And then the Ruffalo character and Toni Collette's character, they are misdirected because they are just so ham-handed and so over the top that you don't take them seriously. So there's no threat there whatsoever. It's not, it loses its interest because he's trying to make that comic, making fun of those characters as opposed to really exploring them and exposing them for what they're like. Because they are definitely attached to present day politicians and present day ideas and rulers, I think. But I think it's a cop-out to just have them be buffoons.
It looks a lot like, it really looks like a film that was shot in 2022 because Marshall is clearly a mix of Trump and Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And it seems fairly prescient because those two guys weren't big buddies in 2022.
Sure, yeah.
But they keep talking about Marshall as the guy who lost 2 elections.
Yeah.
I think they must have been anticipating that Trump would run again and lose, and now suddenly we live in 2025 where Trump has only lost 1 election, and this very contemporary satire suddenly looks quite dated. Just for the sake of a couple of years of world events that have overtaken the film. I wrote in my notes here that the characters in this film are so broad they can barely fit on the screen.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
So, Marshall is a kind of incredibly broad sort of caricature. His wife, Toni Collette, is Ilfa, she's called it. She's sort of like a television cooking show caricature. I mean, again, she's ludicrously broad.
Yeah. Well, she's a Lady Macbeth television cooking character, I think.
Yes. Like Nasha, who she's the one who's Mickey is her boyfriend 18 times over, and she seems like her character just varies so wildly. She's kind of tough, and then she's high, and then she's kind of unstoppable and emotional. Then she doesn't seem to care that her boyfriend has duplicated himself and that he's going to be deleted. She's sort of all over the place. Yeah. And then there's kind of like this other woman in this sort of slightly abandoned love triangle. Who, she seems very keen to sleep with Mickey, but she's also probably grieving her girlfriend, maybe. Yeah. And then for a while, she's Marshall's kind of favorite girl, and then she's angry that he considers her just a walking uterus. And then for the last third of the film, she completely disappears altogether and just gets forgotten about. There's so many sort of broad strokes and forgotten about moments. I started making a list of the threads that were forgotten about. So early on, here's my list. They ban sex on the ship, and that sort of gets forgotten about. Marshall has this kind of cough. And he's kind of coughing around at everybody, and that just gets forgotten about. They're selling kind of Oxy, which is this sort of drug on board, but that sort of largely gets forgotten about. They kind of sing a religious song at the dinner, and then Mickey is given this hormonal beef which makes him sick, and they inject him with some purple gel, but the purple gel doesn't do anything, and they forget about it all completely. When towards the end of the film they have to leave the ship to go and try and blow up the alien creepers, the ramp that people use to exit the ship is stuck, but that gets completely forgotten about. There are all these elements where it really looks like this is going to be a bit of a story. I bet we come back and see that again, and it just gets forgotten. And it makes you wonder, is there a 5-hour cut of this film where each of these little strands is collected together and they all come together to make something? But to cut it down to 2.25 hours, they ended up leaving them all flapping in the breeze.
I think you may be onto something.
Because there are just so many abandoned strands.
So it makes me rethink. I don't want to see what's on the cutting room floor, because it's probably a lot of it. You're probably right, is that they had to just grab little bits of stories, and none of them were explored enough to really hang in a 2.25 hour film. It gets too bloated. And I think another thing is there's not a whole lot of connection between a lot of those characters and those scenes and those plot lines. You're following Mickey for the most part, which is, that would be wise, is really just to really focus more on Mickey. And then the one other thing that they don't forget, which I don't like, is that part about how they had this deal that went bad on Earth. And then that should be forgotten. That should just be backstory. But no, it's that Mickey's partner in crime back on Earth is also on the planet with him, and he's still in touch with the loan shark that they owe money to. And as I alluded earlier, I mean, the guy's not there, and they're never going back to Earth. So why are you even worried about that? And then that's the one thing they decide to remember and bring that back, and it was just bad.
It's like, I mean, you can sort of see that they have, in writing the script, they have attempted to get characters to do things for reasons, but they haven't thought too carefully about whether the reasons are actually believable, properly rounded, motivated reasons. Or if they're just reasons that are put in to keep the story moving. It does feel a little bit like it's been written in a sort of scattershot manner. Where we just, let's keep the scenes moving, keep churning them out. This can happen because of that. And it doesn't seem to be a particularly coherent whole that's keeping the whole thing
And that
together.
takes me to one of the most fundamental screenwriter questions, which is why. Why is this happening? Why is the character doing this? And I don't think you and I can't, explain why some of these things are happening. I do have two questions for you that I didn't quite get, and Matt just needs some clarification, I guess. It gets a little worse, actually. Towards the end, we realize it's a rival filmmaking crew that's recording Ruffalo and Colette, and were you under the impression that they were working for the Marshall character, or they were sort of trying to out the Marshall character with this?
There seems to be some kind of weird rebellion where they are recording secret footage of misdemeanor, and that's in there for 10 minutes. No, it never really amounts to anything.
It doesn't really amount to anything, and that seems like another crucial point. Would have been interesting. And then finally, it sort of ends on this post dream sequence moment where I think Mickey's at this ceremony because Nash is now in power on the planet, or one of the leaders of the planet, and they're gonna they've made this agreement never to clone people again. Is that the right? They're not going to create expendables. They're liberating the expendables, so they're going to be an expendable free planet. But then I think Mickey goes into this dream sequence where he sees Toni Collette. She's trying to reprint Ruffalo's character and trying to get Mickey to taste the blood of Ruffalo's character, which is, again, weird. And I don't know why you would put blood in these things. I guess, are they that human? Anyway, we'll talk about blood later. But then it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that he has dreamt all that up. He sort of wakes up and then the ceremony happens again. So that's not a real sequence.
No, yeah, I think that's just a dream sequence right at the end of the film.
Okay, and I think that's a more interesting film if she does actually reprint him, and then I would think you could get to that moment earlier. That's your Act 3 right there. It's not a little add-on at the end in the dream sequence. I think that's probably the Act 3 that would have been more sensible to me, because otherwise it's just we have to kill the creepers. Want their baby back. There seem to be a lot of creepers. I don't know why they need this one baby back, but they have to blow up. They're trying to blow up the creepers so that they won't scare them off, so that they won't attack Is it a ship that they're living in at that point?
I think so. Yeah.
That's the climax that we get. It's pretty standard, I guess.
Yep.
The creepers turn out to be friendly, or they had saved Mickey 17 earlier, and they just want these people off the planet, or to stop kidnapping their babies or whatever. It was just worms. What is it about the worms? I mean, Dune had the earthworms as well, and you get wood lice. I'm sorry, wood lice.
Invertebrates. They are the new bad guys. Yep.
So yeah, I'm sorry that it is as bad as it was. I thought, I saw the trailer. I thought, okay, there's enough in here. I think it's going to piece together, and it didn't.
And it's strange because it really looks like it could have done, and yet strangely it does not. It's very peculiar. I think
another potentially interesting. It's really not interesting, but potentially interesting aspect is that this came out. If this had been released a little earlier, Mark Ruffalo would have had two very similar characters in two films at about the same time, because it was about the Emma Stone film was called
Poor Things.
Poor Things. He plays a very similar character, and I hate to see Mark Ruffalo hamming it up like that again and again. So I hope that he gets away from that, because I think he's a good actor, and no one looks like a good actor when they're hamming to the camera or hamming to the director's ill-thought direction. So. He's lucky. I think he dodged a bullet there, perhaps.
Yeah, it does look like the majority of the direction was more, and now more. Yeah. As I alluded to earlier, I did read the book this week. So I did read Edward Ashton's book, Mickey 7.
Ooh. Mickey 7? Not 17?
Mickey 7, yeah. They had to add an extra 10 Mickeys in order to turn it into a proper
film. Oh my God, that would have cut the running time in half.
I'm sorry to say, the book Mickey 7, it's not very good. I'm afraid it's interesting how it's a short book, but yeah, even though it's a short book, it still feels stretched out. It kind of feels like a novella that has been stretched out to novel length. It kind of opens very, very similar way to the film, and I suspect that is why the film opens the way that it does, because it's exactly the same moment that opens the book. And we have, Mickey 7 or Mickey 6. Now, Mickey 7, dying at the bottom of a ravine, and then he explains to the reader how he got there and what's happening. But the book has this sort of blokey, jokey sort of tone all the way through that's just very tiring to read.
Yeah.
It kind of reads like somebody really loved Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and so they wanted to write a book that was like that.
Oh.
But it's not, it's not nearly as funny. It just ends up being kind of just a little bit wearing.
Yeah.
So the tone of it. I think in both the book and the film, it has the potential for some terrible existential angst, doesn't it? Yeah. Knowing that you're going to die, you'll be reprinted, but will it be you? Probably it won't. But in neither the book nor the film does Mickey seem particularly anxious or angry or worried or frightened about dying. It's all treated with a bit of a shrug and a lame half joke, isn't it?
Yes.
And like in the book, Mickey never seems to feel any strong emotions. Like everything that he encounters, life, death, sex, it's all kind of met with the same sort of shrug. It's like you're being asked to root for somebody who doesn't really believe in anything very strongly.
Yeah.
And so then it becomes difficult to really want anything for that person. And then there's a couple of other things that are worth noting about the book. There's an awful lot of, this is what makes it feel stretched out. There's an awful lot of filler. There's a huge number of pages about rations and being hungry.
Oh boy.
And then sort of swapping rations and having somebody else's rations and then having to share rations with the clone. And so you're really kind of hungry, but you're trading rations. Now you're going to get even fewer calories. And now I'm going to eat some paste because that's the only thing that's still available to eat. It's like, it's one of the things that used to really irritate the hell out of me about those Harry Potter books. It was every 5 pages you'd have a paragraph about what Harry Potter ate for his tea.
Yeah.
I don't need to know what Harry Potter ate for yet another meal. And this feels very much like that. It's like if you need to stretch your book out by 30 pages, we'll just write down what the character ate for every day.
And is the book by Edward Ashton? Is that his contribution? And
it is.
Okay.
Yeah, so the book is by him. I think then Bong Joon Ho has written the script
okay.
based on the book. So I don't think he has contributed to the script as far as I'm aware.
I think at some point on a future pod, we probably should talk about people who write books just to sell them as films.
It's apparently, I read that this is the new way to get your script commissioned, that people don't want to read scripts, but they will option a book that has sold a few copies.
Which makes funny in an industry that doesn't like to read, because it'd take less time to read the script than to read a book generally, unless it's a short book or a picture book. I can see that. You can see that this is just a book that was written, I think, probably with the idea of turning it into a film from the very beginning. A lot of people are doing that now, I think, and I think they're two different art forms, and I think it's disingenuous to just, write a good book. Yeah. Or make a good film, or take parts of a good book and turn it into a film, but you can't really squeeze all of a good quality long book into a film. One thing that I really didn't like is that Mickey 17 is speaking for all these other Mickeys, and he's using the same voice as if he knew those experiences with the same kind of mindset, and then all of a sudden you get Mickey 18, which seems like a very different character. And I think that's not helpful, because it would probably be more interesting to hear the various Mickeys, and that's a lot of more work for an actor like Pattinson, especially if you've expanded it from 7 Mickeys to 17 Mickeys. But I think that would have at least made the narration a bit more interesting, I guess, if you had Mickey 1's thoughts, Mickey 2 thoughts, because otherwise it feels like, it's kind of a contradiction. He's different every time, but he's got the same voice and he's talking about the same experiences every time. And I guess each Mickey is producing new memories, or are you only using past tense memories? That's another question I had, because they've downloaded him the first, uploading, I don't know what they're doing at that point, but they've got his memories from the past, presumably when he's a human, but I don't know if they're adding memories as they go along or not. So it's there's some inconsistencies with that character or characters that I think kind of interferes with the logic world. I don't think in a film like this, logic world is terribly important, but these are things that struck me.
Yeah, they've certainly bypassed logic world, I think. Yes, they've driven straight past it at 70 miles an hour. One of the big themes that I think they feel, it seems like they feel very proud of this notion that characters keep asking Mickey, what's it like to die?
Yeah, exactly.
And yet, when they explain the rules of the film, and I'm not sure whether they really stick to the rules of the film, he needs to have a backup of his experiences every week. Yeah. And when they print a new body, they load the old backup in.
There you go.
And obviously, they never back up any of the moments when he dies.
Yeah.
He doesn't know what it's like to die. Yeah. All he knows is all his memories up to the last backup. Yeah. So he will have no recollection of ever dying, even though he's done it 16 times. Yeah. So is that, I don't know whether that's the film sort of ignoring its own rules, or whether they were so pleased with this notion of being able to ask what the experience of dying was like. That seems so profound and deep. Yeah, make sure we get that, keep that coming back.
It's interesting because at least one point, he's incinerated before he's even fully dead, I think. So you'd think he would remember that bit, right?
I'm not convinced that they've really thought too hard about how it works. And just like you said at the beginning, there is great potential here. This notion that there's a machine that will print you out if something bad happens to you, and what does that do to the value of life? Yeah. Surely, wouldn't everybody on the ship want to be immortal? Yeah. Does that make you the lowest of the low, or does that actually make you the top dog if you effectively can't be killed? I understand he's trying to use it as a metaphor for an economic underclass, but it doesn't really quite work. And I think they've managed to avoid all of the ideas that would make this genuinely interesting. Yeah.
And when you think of it, if it can be reprinted again and again and again, it kind of loses value as a life form. Expendables was a word that I used to use, and I'm not sure if everyone in the Star Trek community did, but I used it with that show, and it was usually a character who, wasn't one of your regular actors or regular actor on the series, But they would show up. I think they always wore red. Is that right?
Red
like Scotty
shirts,
engineering. Yep. And, you knew they were going to die. It was great, but they at least had that moment before they died. And then their death has value, I think. His death, I guess it's not supposed to have value, but if you're attracted to this person as a protagonist and you want to know their story, it gets harder and harder to invest much in it because he's going to get killed. And he's also he's not a living thing. You're not attached to him for that long. So I think those are questions that make it seem a little ill thought out. And I think this is also a story from Star Trek. There was the one where there was sort of like this big earthworm that was mining. It ate rock, and they were mining on this planet.
Right,
and they were scared of this thing. It had killed someone because it had taken one of its eggs. They didn't realize that these big rocks were actually the woodlouse's eggs. And then Spock has to do this. Oh, it's an incredible mind meld where he's really, he's got this big, ugly woodlouse, and he's holding it and almost making love to it, and he gets the feelings, and he's able to interpret the woodlouse language to the crew. And actually, the woodlouse could help them, could actually do a lot of the mining that they wanted to do if they just left her eggs alone. And it was just, that story is kind of in there. So it's not like this came out of nowhere. I think they watched Star Trek.
Oh man. It just goes to prove almost any good science fiction story has already been done by Star Trek, hasn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Original Star Trek. Original, yeah.
Well, even though Mickey and it's Timo, isn't it? Is his buddy?
Yes, that's
on the
right.
run from debt collectors.
Yeah,
and they are convinced that they are many light years from Earth and they are safe. I tell you, somebody else who will always track you down, no matter how many light years you are away from the Earth, and that is the Cliché Squad.
Cliché Squad.
Oh my God! It's one of those moments where I'm very happy to have the Cliché Squad in my corner.
I think they'll be dispatching an entire ship, won't they, to track down all the characters for arrests for this film.
Niflheim or whatever you called the planet. I'm very impressed that you got the names of the planets.
Yeah, but that's what happens when you read the book. You see, it gets imprinted on your brain because I've read it 200 times. I wrote down 2 cliches for the Cliché Squad this week, even though I'm sure there are many more. But there are 2 that particularly irritated me. One was evil scientists, which is just that I feel like, I know quite a lot of scientists, and usually they are brave, noble, underpaid people with great ideas who work very hard. Very, very few of them are evil.
That's right.
And yet, whenever you see a scientist in a film, 80% of the time they will be evil.
Yeah.
There's a real minority of nice, good scientists. Most scientists are evil, and pretty much all of the scientists on this expedition, one way or another, even the good ones, are still evil.
Yeah.
They're broadly evil scientists. That's the only kind you get. And then my other cliche was just the irresistible boy that, admittedly, Robert Pattinson is a nice-looking lad, but it does look like, for somebody who is the absolute lowest of the low on this spaceship, everybody wants to have sex with Mickey.
Yeah.
Yes, he seems to be beating women off with a stick, doesn't he?
Yes. And I actually wondered if that's why Nasha stayed with him for 17 iterations or 18 iterations. I thought it was kind of funny. At one point, she's very excited by the act of, the opportunity to be with 2 Mickeys at the same time. There's some sweating in that scene and some panting and all that. So it does make you wonder. Yes.
What would people really use the clones for? Yes. Yeah, I think we're getting to the hub of it now, aren't we? Yes.
For me, the most offensive cliche is just this over-the-top idiot leader, which is the Mark Ruffalo character. I think we're seeing that far too often. Like, idiots are fine as long as they are really menacing or nefarious, and Mark Ruffalo is neither because he's just hamming it up in a film. I guess this is a comedy. Did you put comedy in your long category of this film?
I did. What did I say? Satirical sci-fi drama adventure. That's what I thought it was.
I think he was told that it was going to be a funny film or something like that, and he and Toni Collette just play these over-the-top, like, dumb leaders, I guess, and I guess they're being used by the proto-Nazi guy who's flashing his cross and trying to colonize the planet or whatever. But I think that's kind of it's a dangerous trope, because one might say we have presidents who are like that character. But I think ultimately, what makes them dangerous and better antagonists is that maybe they come off that way, but they're actually super smart, or they're doing it for a reason. Yep. I didn't get the feeling that Mark Ruffalo's character of Marshall was that at all. So I just don't like that much as a cliche. I think it's kind of pointless, and it didn't, it doesn't pay off in this film. I don't think I laughed more than a couple times in this film.
Oh, I think you laughed more than me in that case. Yeah, I'm not sure I can remember snickering.
Yeah, so and that's what happens when you're messing around with tone. I think you just don't know what you're supposed to take seriously and what's intended as comedy.
The comedy that wishes it was funny. We've seen a number of those recently, haven't we? Yes. Okay, so it seems to have rather underperformed.
Yes.
The box office. I don't think anybody is tremendously surprised. I'm hoping that Bong Joon Ho's next picture is perhaps something a little bit more interesting.
Yes.
You can shake off that Oscar curse and get back to some proper work.
Please.
In the meanwhile, talking about getting back to work, let's have a break.
Yeah.
We'll see whether we can find some woodlice and come back after the break, and we'll talk about another film which is sort of largely about human-shaped people coming out of a printer. We're going to watch Blade Runner from 1982.
Have you ever wondered where all the old garden hose all across the planet is repurposed? Is there a tether of garden hose from Earth to an inner planet that enables the flow of communication and fluids? Or is some brusque fellow hoarding it to move goods and information to his future lair on Mars? Wonder no more, because our great friends in Canada, of course, hosers, have come up with a solution. You see, hosers is now processing previously loved garden and kitchen hose into an entirely new line of hosiery. That's right. Hosers are producing slacks, pants, skirts, lingerie, culottes, leggings, pantaloons, stockings, knickers, and socks with old hose, PEC piping, and kitchen faucet extensions, and everything comes in a spectrum of colors, styles, and sizes. Better yet, hose can be inflated with warm air for the colder climates, or filled with ice water or earth-safe coolants in hotter weather. Need a little spice in the intimate and private spaces? Try some of the rippling, waving, and vibration settings to put you in the right mood. Are you having a few extra pints at the football match or concert event? Turn on the output settings and you can piss your hose without pissing yourself. Do you need a little extra exercise? Add water weight to the hose and go for your walk or run while turning it into a real workout. Simply put, our friends at Hosers are solving many of the world's most pressing problems in one go. We recycle products destined for the landfill and creatively transform them into high fashion pieces while clothing the masses, warming them, cooling them, and allowing them to soil themselves in style. Hose. Life after the garden is where the hose really grows. Check out Hosers and all of their fine products at hosers.ca. That's hosers.ca. Because the CA is for Canada, eh?
God bless recycling. I love it. Well, I hope you'll forgive me if I try on my new trousers, courtesy of hosers.ca, while we come back from the break. I reckon someone, somewhere, surely, is planning a film of the life story of Oscar Pistorius, the Paralympic runner, which is going to be called Blade Runner. No?
Could be.
But until the day that gets released, we have 1982's Blade Runner.
Yeah.
So we were hunting around for a film to compare to Mickey 17, and this is the one that we chose. Ridley Scott's picture after Alien, which famously did not ignite the box office in 1982, but went on to have a very long culty life after its original cinematic release.
And then we saw the final cut. I had it on DVD. I borrowed it from the library and got it on DVD. So I saw the final cut, and I think we're going to be talking about the same version of the film. And
so
people should know
I watched the final cut as well. I did something which I've never done before, which is I bought it from the Apple store.
Oh my!
As a digital download. So it was $3.49 to rent it, but only $4.99 to buy it. Ooh. And I thought, well, I might want to watch this twice. I'm just going to buy it. So, so for this knockdown price, we've got this immaculate, beautiful 4K Apple TV version.
Oh, good.
We were going to pair Mickey 17 with Moon.
Yes, that was my suggestion. Yes.
Yeah, I personally, I don't particularly like that film, although it does have a lot of parallels with Mickey 17. So I've just shamelessly seized the opportunity to talk about what I guess is one of the most influential films of the last 50 years. Now seems as good an opportunity as any to try and squeeze it into the pod.
I think that was a good choice. It does work well. It's nice because it's a good film as opposed to watching two bad films. that was a nice choice. But you didn't know that Mickey 17 was going to underperform. But I think it worked out pretty well.
Well, I mean, I couldn't agree. But I think this is a good film. I've seen it probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 times now. This is the first time I've ever seen the final cut.
Okay, yeah.
I've never seen it looking so good. It does look absolutely fantastic now, I think. Just looks incredible. And it's, it definitely gets filed in my box as a flawed masterpiece.
Yeah.
But masterpiece nonetheless.
And as we talk about it, I think it's far more focused. There's still a few problems that I have with it, but it's far more focused than Mickey 17. So
it knows what it is, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And what do you remember what the running time was on the final cut? I feel it was right around 2 hours, but I'm not.
Yeah, it might be just under 2 hours, I think, like 1:57, something like that. But so it's the right length.
Yeah, it's the right length for a large story world that requires some sort of epic filmmaking. I think it clocks in at just about the right time. So. And it is a little bit different from. I saw this film when we were off mic earlier. Is that what podcasters are when we're talking privately? I confess that I saw this film as part of a university class, and that's 36 years ago, I think, at least 35 anyway. And we read the book, which is a Philip K. Dick book called Duke, Android's Dream of Electric Sheep. So I, like you, I read the book. Not this week, but 36 years ago. So I don't remember it. So that's the extent of the Two Reel Cinema Club book reading club this week.
I did read so I had read the book before. I have read it again this week. In fact, I've read the book twice for this film. So not only did I read Mickey 7, I did read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, and I have also read Future Noir by Paul Salmon, which it's like a 700-page book, all about every minuscule aspect of the production of Blade Runner. It's incredibly dense, incredibly detailed. It's the kind of book that you have to be an absolute nerd to enjoy reading. Can you guess whether I enjoyed reading it?
I think you did.
I did, yes, I did. I loved it. It's fabulous, but I am an absolute nerd.
I have this image of you, though, I've got to say, in surgeries, just dosing these patients to the point where you do not have to worry about them for 6 or 7 hours, and you have time to read because you are a voluminous reader. Do you dose out the surgeons as well so that you can sit there?
That would be a good idea. Yes, if you take the lid off the gas canister, you can pretty much put everybody in the room off to sleep. It makes so much time for hobbies. It's brilliant.
That's right, and then they all feel fine anyway. So yeah, operation successful.
Do you want to tell us what the story of Blade Runner is?
Boy, do I ever. Directed by Ridley Scott, as we said, based on a book by Philip K. Dick. Screenplays by Hampton Fankber? How do you?
Fancher is how I've been pronouncing it.
Okay, Fancher. Is there a B in there? Maybe I wrote the B incorrectly. Oops, sorry. Fancher. David Webb Peoples, who did 12 Monkeys and Unforgiven.
Yeah, Unforgiven.
Pretty hot for a short time, and I think he's just older now, so I don't think he's writing anymore. But
I think he wrote Unforgiven in like 1977, something like that. And it was like 15 years before Clint Eastwood then actually made the film.
Yeah, and then so I mean, he's got a pretty good spread of over the years of some productions. And I remember when you're reading some of those screenwriting books from the 90s, his name would pop up often, and then I think he kind of fell off the map a little bit. But he and his wife had written a couple of things together as well. I think 12 Monkeys together. Harrison Ford, kind of what is this sort of after at least an Indiana Jones or two, and then
he'd done 2 Star Wars pictures and an indie at this point.
So he was pretty hot at that time.
Fairly firmly fixed as probably the biggest film star in the world, more or less, at this point.
Daryl Hannah's in there, Rutger Hauer's in there, and much like Parasite, it's set in 2019. Or Parasite was made in 2019. We don't know really. For the set in 2019. Los Angeles is on fire. It's bleak, smoky. Oil refinery smokestacks are just belching inferno balls. But the wildfire probability is very low due to nonstop precipitation in this multilingual LA of language barriers. Yikes. It's dim. It's definitely an apocalypse kind of story world. The lucky among the citizens of LA at that time seemed to be living in these great pyramids, which also make home to the Tyrell Corporation. It's a replicant production company. At the outset, there's this interview, and a replicant kills his interrogator, who is trying to determine if he is human or replicant, because a band of 4 rogue replicants has returned to Earth and is causing trouble. Harrison Ford's Deckard character, I guess is he still a cop at this point? I'm not really sure.
I think he's retired.
He's retired,
I think.
Yeah. So it's one of those, he's coming out of retirement for that one last job kind of thing. Harrison Ford's Deckard is arrested and taken to Captain Bryant, who needs him to find these 4 replicants to confirm that they're replicants, because he's got a good eye for the replicants, and eliminate them. There is a very brief refusal of the call in the office. He says, I'm not going to do it. And then he does it. First, he goes to Mr. Tyrell, the creator of the replicants, sort of the Dr. Frankenstein character, maybe. He's going to test Rachel, who's sort of an assistant to Dr. Tyrell. She's very convincing, but she is a replicant and possibly a love interest. I called this a meet ugly. It's not really a meet cute, because we've seen a replicant be identified and killed. So Rachel passes. He can't really tell. Deckard can't really tell if she's a replicant or not. She's such a good version of the replicants. So will Deckard go replicant and even tie the knot with one? Will he go native? Or will Deckard hunt them down from lowest on the pecking order to the highest, as so many protagonists do in the film world? And more importantly, will he get the top skin job? That's what they call replicants on this, a skin job, before said skin job pulls the old monster, taking down his Dr. Frankenstein creator.
Yeah.
That would be Tyrell of the, or I guess his name is Tyrell, right? He's the name,
Tyrell, yeah.
Named the company after himself, the Tyrell Corporation. So that's just to set things up. Obviously, if you've read a 700-page book, I might just turn it over to you, and then I might just take a little bit of this anesthesia and come back at the end of the pod.
Smell deeply from this bottle. I do realise I've read a 700-page book, so I'm absolutely crammed with background, but there is a lot of background for this film. So apparently, the first person to express an interest in the book was Martin Scorsese in 1969.
Wow.
Then Herb Jaffe wrote a spoof version of the book in 1974. So there were previous options on the book. And then Hampton Fancher, who was a bit of a sort of bit part actor who then wanted to get into production.
Yeah.
He wanted to option the book, and he went to go and see Philip K. Dick. But he couldn't option the book while the Jaffe option still stood.
Sure.
And then eventually that option lapsed. It was re-optioned in 1977. And Fancher found himself writing a script. I think Barbara Hershey was Hampton Fancher's either wife or girlfriend at the time, and she persuaded him that, you should write the script, darling. You write it. So he spent a year writing a draft. And then Michael Dealey, who was one of the producers on The Deer Hunter, agreed to do it. But the script went through all sorts of changes. So it was originally Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Then it was changed just to Android. Then for a while it was called Mechanismo, and then it was called Dangerous Days.
Yes.
It only became Blade Runner because I think that was the title of a short story by William Burroughs, and so they licensed just the title.
Oh wow!
From Burroughs. For a while it was going to be called Gotham City, but Bob Kane objected, and they weren't allowed to use that.
Los Angeles. Come on.
And then eventually they managed to get financing, and then like at the 11th hour the people who were financing it pulled out of Blade Runner and gave the money to Brian De Palma to make Blowout with John Travolta.
Oh wow. Yeah.
So it was this kind of extremely long, complicated journey before eventually I think Ridley Scott turned it down initially and then decided no, he did want to do it. And there's lots and lots of changes in the early versions of the script. Apparently, the thing that really sold the script in the early days was this big final scene. Deckard has killed all of the robots, and then he drives out to the desert, and he leaves abandons his car, and he just walks out into the desert to die. And the camera gradually pulls back and back and back to show eventually the whole Earth, which is kind of like ruined and a desert.
Yeah.
And then there was another version of the script where at the very end of the movie, Deckard has killed all the androids, and he comes home and he starts to play the piano. And as he does, his hand clenches up in exactly the same way that Roy Batty, the lead robot, hand clenched up towards the end of the film. There was all sorts of different scenes which used to finish the film. So it's a big, long, complicated process before getting to the story that we actually see now. And by the time it eventually made it into cinemas, even one of the producers, Ivor Powell, I think, was interviewed at the time and said, "Well, it's a personal favourite of mine. I'm proud of it, but Blade Runner is slightly disjointed." I think it was always kind of a troubled production. I think there was a lot of angst on set. I think Harrison Ford and Sean Young did not get on at all well.
Oh,
I think the American crew and Ridley Scott did not really get on at all well. Huh. I think Ridley Scott was always used to being his own camera operator, and then because of union rules, he wasn't allowed to be the camera operator on this film. So it was just constant clashes. I think it was exhausting, difficult, challenging film to make. But after all that, I think it was released against. So the other films that were released in like early 1982 against this film was Star Trek II, Conan, The Thing, and E.T.
Ooh.
So if you were going to release a science fiction film against those other four, how can you expect to succeed?
That's a pretty good Star Trek 2 as far as Star Trek's go.
Yeah, Star Trek 2 is one of the really good Star Treks, isn't it? Yep, exactly.
And E.T., it's a little feel good, but I liked it. I liked it when I was a kid.
So it was a crowded roster for science fiction films that year.
Yeah.
So not super surprised it didn't do very well. The reviews at the time were terrible. The LA Times called it Blade Crawler. The New York Times called it a muddled, gruesome mess. The only good review they got was from Christianity Today, which said, this film is truly adult in its thoughtfulness and complexity. So when your only good review is Christianity Today, that you know that you're not going to have a big crowd pleaser.
Yeah. Wow. I think it's aged well.
Yes.
I think it's a good film. It's not like one of my favorites. I don't revere it on bended knee or anything like that. But I think it is a very good film. I think it's very well shot, even if he didn't get to do the camera operation himself. It looks good. It's well directed. And I think it's aged pretty well. It's funny that it's set in 2019 because I ain't seeing no replicants or anything. It's a little overambitious, I suppose. But they could have changed the date. I wonder if Philip K. Dick had it set in 2019. I don't remember the book so well.
I think that the book may have been set up even earlier than 2019, possibly, actually.
And I think, that you can overlook that. I mean, that's just a sort of the nightmare is going to come at some point. And here the script tells us it's coming, 6 years ago or whatever. But yeah, I have a few major questions or problems with it, but nothing. Yeah, I mean, I watched Mickey 17 first, so I was just looking for a good film and escapism. So I was happy to see this. The final cut, I think it's funny that you mentioned those other endings, because those other endings sound better than the final cut's ending. I remember the ending where they're in some sort of space car or something like that, and they fly up over like Northern California. They're escaping. The Rachel character, is it Rachel?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
The Rachel character and Deckard character, I think they're together and maybe I'm just totally misremembering this, but I think they fly away and it looks like better times are ahead. Is that right?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. Okay. I think that was a tacked on ending after the initial ending tested very badly.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think, they shot some cutaways of the two of them inside a cockpit, and then it's unused footage from The Shining. At the green space. Stanley Kubrick let them use for free, I think. Of just these. So originally, I think that final footage, it shows Jack Nicholson's car driving through the countryside in Canada, and so they had to reframe those shots so that the car now does not appear and you just see open road.
Interesting.
But that's what that kind of that tacked on happy ending was.
And so I don't remember the original, like there's a live action unicorn sequence, and then there's the origami unicorn on the floor. I think that's the very last shot in this final cut. Doesn't mean, I'm not saying that I'm a fan of the original ending by any means, but I didn't think that this one really is that much better. And I wonder how that was shot. If that was shot for Ridley Scott's original ending, that's what he wanted to do.
I think that the unicorn footage, which is in the film now, that's new. So I think that was shot in like 2007 or something like that. So I think they spent a day on some horse farm somewhere with a horse with a plastic horns glued to its forehead to get new footage to slot in there. So they keep going back and doing extra little bits again and again and again.
Interesting.
To make these kind of, it's like 5 or 6 different cuts, isn't there, for this film?
Yeah. I mean, I had several. I mean, it was, I think, 4 DVDs, and I said, God, I don't want to watch all of them. I mean, which one do I go with? So that's when I wrote to you and said, are we doing Final Cut? And yes, we were. So,
since then, there is a fan edit of the film available as well, which is called the White Dragon Cut, which features like extra little bits of like amateur done CGI, I think, and little sort of cut bits from a Blade Runner video game, I think, and some other kind of lost footage.
Wow! And
it features a lot more narration. I'm guessing from deleted scenes. There's loads and loads of extra narration in this new fan edit, which I think comes in like 2.5 hours or something like that.
Is it what Harrison Ford did, or are people doing their own narration to piece the story together?
I tried to look this up, and I'm not sure. I think it must be unused Harrison Ford narration.
Interesting.
But there's like a lot of it, and it's utterly non-useful. It's kind of Harrison Ford just sort of telling you what the story is. It's pretty bad narration, really. But I think that's somebody who's such a big fan of the film. They just want more of it.
Yeah. So
they've scraped together every last possible little bit of footage that they can and squeezed it all in so that it's Blade Runner, but more.
So where do we go? How do we talk about this? Because you've got so much useful information, and then I just have some petty opinions to share.
I've written some little comments here. My first one is just the story world, like you alluded to, is just great here, isn't it? Insofar as Ridley Scott puts so much detail into every frame, and the story world really feels very, very fully realised. But it's not made obvious. You're given a little bit of credit to figure it out for yourself. It's a ruined world. There seem to be these kind of robot animals, but no one explicitly really talks about where the animals are. It rains all the time, but people don't explain, it's always raining here, isn't it, because of the ruined climate or whatever. It often refers to things which are like outside the scope of the film. So it really feels like a really, really wide canvas. I wrote down in my notes here, if this film was made today, we would end up with dialogue that would explain where the animals are and why it rains.
Yeah.
And there'll be some dialogue like, they hijacked a ship off the Tannhauser Gate. What, the Tannhauser Gate? That new spaceport orbiting Jupiter? Yeah, I heard about that. It's really big. You'd end up with something like that. Or there's a line where Zora says, you think I could afford a real snake? And if that film was made today, she would say something like, do you think I could afford a real snake? After the FB20 virus killed all of the reptiles 2 years ago out in the desert? Do you remember all that? So a lesser film would try and explain all the things that we see.
Yeah.
And I wrote here, why don't we see films like that anymore? Why don't we see films where there's a huge amount of background story which is not explained and not gone into detail over, and it's just allowed to exist in the background? It lets you use your own imagination and your own observation to try and fill in the gaps. Much more compelling. And it doesn't slow the story down.
Yeah. And we did dedicate, in my mind, part of a popcorn counter to exactly that. Like today, there's a bit too much explaining and not enough showing. So that does capture something that we've at least addressed as being a sort of a present day conundrum for filmmakers, I think. But having said that, there's one thing that I wanted to see more of, because I read the book. Did I tell you that? I read the book.
You did read the book.
More than 3 decades ago. One of my favorite parts of the book is Mercerism, which is this religion and worshiping animals. And it really is important. It's sort of a status thing if you have a live animal as opposed to an electronic animal, right? And that's so that's why the title makes sense. Not the Blade Runner title, but the book's title, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? So I guess, like, would a replicant want an artificial animal, whereas humans want a real animal? And as I recall, they're housed on the tops of these buildings where people live. And for me, it was a really interesting part in the book. I think they're worshiping animals because they've just screwed up the earth. It's sort of this dystopian landscape. It's, as you said, really well realized. But there's almost no mention of Mercerism, and that line about the snake just goes over your head because we don't see people worshiping their animals on the rooftops, which I think would have been really interesting. And I think that final scene, well, is it the final scene? The scene that we're all waiting for, the climax where Rutger Hauer and Harrison Ford somehow, for whatever reason, they end up almost falling off this building and getting on top of the rooftop. And that's where the final confrontation happens. I think that scene would be more poignant if there were a bunch of animals around watching this, having seen that. And I think that they, I can understand you've got to cut some things out to make the film. But for me, that was really one of the most compelling parts of the novel. And I really wanted to see that more in the film. And I remember not seeing much of it in the original version that I saw. And then, seeing the same amount or even less of it coming across anyway in the final cut. So for me, I think that's the kind of thing that, again, you can't do that with a line or two of dialogue. You've got to set up the world of these people going upstairs just to spend time with their live animal, or the replicants worshiping their electronic animals or whatever. I think that would be really interesting, and that gives a whole layer to the society. You see the dystopia, you see the apocalypse, but you don't see these moments of just trying to return to something normal or have something to believe in, like Mercerism. So I think that's a mistake to leave that out.
I read the book a little bit more recently than 36 years ago, so I did read it last week. Do you like Philip K. Dick?
I've not read much, so I'm not much of a science fiction reader at all. Yeah. There are a couple. I love Octavia Butler's stuff, so I like some of the Afrofuturism stuff, but I'm not really a Philip K. Dick person. There's a quick nod to Ray Bradbury too here. The replicants are staying in the Bradbury Hotel, I think, in Blade Runner. Yeah, and I've just never read a whole lot of science fiction. So, I mean, I've seen, so many films seem to have been based on his works. I've seen some films that I like. So I think his books obviously blend to filmmaking. They work for films.
I've read, I don't know, probably 15 or 20 of his novels. Wow. I mean, a lot of them. They are I feel like I might have said this before on the pod. They're all the same, but they're all brilliant.
Yeah.
So all of his books, they're sort of about the same thing. So they're all about it's either called Capgras syndrome or Fregoli syndrome. It's these two psychiatric syndromes. One where you think that people close to you have been kidnapped and replaced with identical copies.
Yeah.
Or Fregoli syndrome is where the two people you believe are the same person in disguise. And I think both of these, they're sort of related to face blindness as well. Just this whole idea that there's something that you've noticed about the world that other people have not, or that there's something kind of deceptive and shifting about the world. And I think Philip K. Dick, I think he did do quite a lot of drugs, and all of his books are sort of about the experience of doing a lot of drugs and feeling kind of disconnected from the world. But that notion of feeling confused and disconnected from the world, that's kind of 90s and early 2000s cinema in a nutshell. It's such a pervasive theme. So no wonder a whole bunch of his movies got turned into, a whole bunch of his books got turned into movies. Yeah, they really lend themselves to the zeitgeist. I think I made a little list of all the things that appear in Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep that aren't in the film. Mm-hmm. This film is like a textbook adaptation because it takes about 6 or 7% of the book and turns that into the film, and the other 96% of the book, or 93%, whatever, gets thrown away. Yeah. So there's this cult of mercerism. There's this empathy machine. You put your hands on it and you can dial in what emotion you want to have. Deckard has a wife in the book. They own an electric sheep, and then he saves the money and he buys a goat. There's this TV and radio show called Buster Friendly. And like the TV show, like it debunks mercerism and claims that it's a fake. There's a parallel police department, like this kind of shadow police department that's actually run and staffed by androids. There's loads and loads of crazy material in the book, which is just utterly forgotten for the film because you can't cram it all in.
You can't.
I think the film has as much as it can accommodate. Yeah. And the fact that it's based on a much wider story means that you get the feeling that it occurs in a real, believable world. Yeah. So having that detail just tucked underneath the surface is what gives it all that depth and richness, I think.
Yeah. I remember liking the book, and I remember being disappointed about certain things that weren't in the film. But you're right. It's a good example of taking some part of a book and turning it into a film and not really trying to be loyal to the whole story and all the words, because you just can't do that. You can't do that. There are some really nice touches in this film. I love Tyrell has really programmed the memories of the replicants. And in the case of Rachel, I guess it's Tyrell using his niece's experiences or something like that, which is a little creepy, but at the same time, I just like it as a connection to storytelling. I mean, a lot of the, filmmaking is storytelling, and each of these characters, we've talked about this a lot, like characters should have a little arc, even if they're a small character in a film or not the major character. And there's this nice little storytelling element that, the replicants are having their stories told for them or forced into them, basically, and then using them. And it's also just, it gives the backstory. It's a great way of doing exposition for characters that aren't really that important ultimately in the story. Even they have a backstory. And I think that really works quite well. Yeah. I like that. I think it runs a little awry in the parallel storylines of Deckard and then some of the other replicants, because there's a little bit of interaction between them, but the people that he's chasing down, we kind of get them in bits and pieces, and Daryl Hannah disappears. She takes her a long time to get on screen, and then she disappears for 20 minutes. She's just hanging out in the apartment of J.F. Sebastian, who's created a lot of the technology to make the replicants work. And he lives a quite meager life among all of his friends, which are just toys that he's created. But she disappears for a long period of time. So I think there actually weren't enough of the replicants' story in this. Like, I wanted to see what they did on the other planet, or why they were so dangerous, and why he had to chase them down. I never really got that feeling. It's just like, oh, they're different. You got to go out and kill them. It's your mission. Just go kill them. And I think that as a result, you're telling the two stories, and they they intersect eventually, but they don't intersect enough, or at least the replicant side isn't explored enough. I really wanted to see what, obviously they want to live longer, but what did they do how were they rogue? What were they doing on these other planets? What kind of, you get a little bit of it at the very beginning when his buddies giving him the assignment to go out and kill them, like what they've done. But you don't see a lot of their menace in the present day parts of the film. In the very opening scene where the Leon character kills his interrogator. I mean, that's kind of about what you see. But I think we needed to explore them more in order to get a better feeling for the urgency of him tracking them down. Because Rutger Hauer seems like a really kind of a cool replicant. And you're wondering, well, why does he have to kill that guy? He's cool.
He seems so cool.
What's he really done? What's he really done? And you get it sort of much later on when Tyrell says, "Oh, we can't update you. You can't have life forever." And then, there's the famous "I'll squeeze your eyes until your brains basically come out of your ears" moment.
Yeah, it's very uncomfortable to watch that scene.
It is.
I think slightly extended now in the final cut. I think it's even slightly more violent than ever used to be.
It was plenty violent, I would say.
Interestingly, in the book, this is one thing which I think a trick that the film misses. It would make the film quite different, but I think it's a great, clever idea. In the book, Deckard meets Rachel, and he does sort of maybe fall in love with her, or at least they make love. But Rachel and Pris, the android who's hanging around with Rutger Hauer, are the same model, so they look identical.
Oh.
And you kind of think, that's like a really interesting, fascinating twist. And that would have been a fun thing to see on screen. That would have been, that would have really messed you up. So I was kind of surprised that they didn't choose to incorporate that. But, I'm happy with the film that we did get.
Yeah.
I do wonder, one of my questions that I wrote down here in my notes, do you reckon, does this film hate women?
Yeah, there's a very uncomfortable scene where Rachel has saved him. She's shot Leon, another replicant, right at the moment when it looks like Leon's going to just kill the Deckard character. So she saves him. She goes back to sort of hang out and hide at his place. They kiss or they don't kiss. Then he sort of forces himself on her and he says, "Say kiss me, say kiss me." And then she has to say kiss me. And then it's just a very yucky, aggressive, I don't know if it's a love scene. It's more like a assault scene, I guess.
That is how I think I've always found that scene uncomfortable to watch, and people can kind of say, "Oh, well, it's it's a reflection of like 1970s notions of romance," but I'm not sure.
Yeah,
romance ever really looked like that, did it?
I hope not. But I mean, yeah, you're right. It's got that sort of rugged masculine thing that we value here in the United States, just forcing himself on a woman, even if she's a replicant. I don't know if we're supposed to think differently about her because she's a replicant, and I think Pris has been introduced in the very beginning as a sort of a sex replicant. Did I get that right or wrong? Or
I mean, there are three women in the film, aren't there? There is Daryl Hannah, who's she's introduced as a basic pleasure model.
Yeah, basically.
I mean, if I was Daryl Hannah, I would be suing about that. Nothing basic about Daryl Hannah. Thank you very much. One of them is Zora is like an assassin. Okay. So you kind of think, oh, she's pretty cool and she knows how to handle herself. But for an assassin, she's had to get a job working as a stripper who dances with a snake.
Yes.
Okay, right, yeah, fine. And then the third woman is this kind of, she's this sort of beautiful 1940s femme fatale sort of sex object, but she's kind of presented that she literally has the mind of a small child, and she is sort of more or less raped on screen. None of the women in this film particularly get a reasonable deal, do they? I think.
No,
and it's not even because I mean, one thing that surprised me watching this film for the first time in a long time is how much it's a noir film with some science fiction elements.
Yeah,
it's
definitely
a noir detective picture, isn't it?
It is.
And there is some sci-fi in it, but it largely, if you had to call it one thing, it's a noir detective picture. And you can't claim that, these noir films, they were very misogynistic, because those noir films were full of tough broads who could give just as good as they got. It's not that you can claim that it's the noir roots that make this film misogynistic. It's just difficult and unpleasant to watch, I think, those scenes now.
Yeah. And is it the same way in the book? Does Philip K. Dick treat the women characters?
So it has that same kind of weird depersonalization, so that I think Deckard makes love with Rachel in the book, but neither of them really feel anything.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it's weird and distant. And the Zora character in the book is an opera singer, not a stripper with a snake. She is a performer, but in a very different kind of disguise. So I think the book is probably a little bit fairer to women in the film.
But it is worth noting that The three major female characters are replicants. Like you've got plenty of background characters who are women, but the major characters are all replicants. So I don't know if, they feel like they can get away with treating them lesser because they're not really human. Is that in there somewhere?
Is that right, or is that? 'Cause I was going to ask you how could you summarize the basic theme of this film? Because I was trying to figure out, I do really, really like this film, but what is it about? And I think the thing it's about is what Tyrell says quite early on when he's very proud of his robots, and he says, "More human than human." That's what we aim for here. I think that's sort of what the film is about, that once it becomes virtually impossible to tell the difference between a robot and a human, well, then there stops being a difference. So you have to treat them equally. I think that's the theme that the film is trying to get at, which would nullify this notion that they're only robots so that we can mistreat them as much as we want.
But they do have expiration dates, right? I think that's for me that's this.
Well, they do, but then so do we. I mean,
it's a lot about wrestling with mortality, and it's a lot. I mean, the Frankenstein story is there in the sense that Tyrell presumably would want to live on himself. Maybe he would become a replicant in some way, but he's created this alternate human or alternate race or humanity, a form of humanity or something like that, life form, I guess. And even they, like humans, are going to complain about having to die at some point. So I think it's like this question of, what's it worth if we're going to die ultimately? And then one of the last lines in this cut anyway, kind of, I think reflects that. Like, the Edward James Olmos character I thought was very strange. He never he has a couple lines of dialogue, but he's just constantly folding paper. He's practicing origami and leaving these little creatures all around throughout the film. And I guess he's supposed to sort of escort or keep an eye on. Maybe he's just surveilling the Deckard character. But at the very end, when it looks like Deckard's going to try and sneak Rachel out and live with her, I guess is what we're supposed to assume. He says, "She won't live." He screams back at her, "Hey, she won't live." And then you're thinking, well, who does? Everyone's going to die at some point. Or I think there's about another question here. Maybe this is too philosophical, but like the quality of living our lives. If is it really? You're right. Is it that much different from being a human in this terrible world, which probably is a real ordeal to live through, or is it maybe even better to be a replicant who's probably not as concerned about breathing good air or having relationships with other humans or whatnot? Maybe it's no different to have a replicant life than a human life. I think that's a question that's in there.
I'm not sure how different the replicants are to humans anyway.
Yeah.
Because they seem to be full of blood, don't they?
Oh God, I wanted to talk about some blood. Yeah.
Some kind of liquid, and it really looks like they are sort of grown and not built, doesn't it?
And they're drinking and eating, I guess. Which
exactly.
Seems...
So like they just seem to be artificial humans.
Yeah.
And maybe artificial humans which are a bit stronger and a bit cleverer than regular humans, but they certainly don't seem to be full of cogs and gears.
No. And it seems like he's done that. Tyrell's done that to make them pass as humans, right? You said earlier maybe they looked the same if they were the same model, but now they've all got these individual backstories. They've all got these individual looks and individual lives. So maybe he's just trying to make them pass as humans because it seems like replicants are becoming illegal on some planets or on Earth, something like that.
I think it's something like, they're only allowed to be used off-world. And certainly in the book, I think this is how they tempt people into the off-world colonies. They say, well, if you go, you get a free replicant, so you will have a servant who looks after your every need.
Wow.
But they're not allowed on the Earth.
Okay.
It's not entirely sure why that is.
Yeah. But again, that's the kind of thing that Mickey 17 lacks, is that's a cool idea about the future, and a story comes out of it. And I think you're right. You don't have to know everything about the story world. You don't need to know everything about the backstory of all these characters. You need a little bit, and to get you thinking about a larger idea, which this film does.
Oh man, films about ideas. What a wonderful notion. I've got kind of only two more little things to mention on my list here. The first is, I'm glad you mentioned Afrofuturism when you were talking about Octavia Butler. I'm going to put forward an argument that Blade Runner is Afrofuturism by stealth. Insofar as as far as I can recall, there are no people with very much melanin in their skin in this film. And the only one is Gaff, isn't it? Who looks like a little bit Latino, I think.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But otherwise, there are no people of colour really in this film. And I wonder whether, does that imply that actually any humans of colour have already made it off the ruined Earth and they are living it up in the off-world colonies?
Huh.
And the only people who are left on Earth are poor white and Asian people.
Yeah.
So I think there is like a weird shadow of Afrofuturism in this film. It's probably more accurately, it just reflects the generic racism of the early 80s in Los Angeles. But and then the other thing I was going to mention was just that there was an awful lot more sexualized content in this film than I remember. I don't remember it being quite so raunchy that, there's all these kind of sly references to pleasure model and snake dancing. But things like that, the one thing I never noticed was that after the scene where Deckard and Rachel presumably, have sex in his apartment, whether she wants to or not, the camera immediately cuts to an image on one of those big animated billboards of a woman putting a thin pink thing in her mouth. Yeah. And I was thinking, oh, God, I never saw that connection. Oh, man. Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. I get what that is. I get that. It does feel like everybody in this film, wants a sex bot, don't they? Yeah. Terrell has this thing where, he's kissing Roy. The sexual politics in this film feels kind of weird, but there's an awful lot of it. Yeah. People seem really into sex bots in this film. And again, I don't know whether that is just an early 80s attitudes towards women. Wouldn't women be better if they if they had the minds of children and they only lived for 4 years? That would be better, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it? I don't know. I feel like maybe that's what they're driving at.
Yeah. Another thing I'm glad you mentioned the billboards, because there's a lot of product placement in this film. I wrote down just 5, but Coca-Cola, of course, Coca-Cola's in every film, it seems. Atari.
Yes.
Cuisinart.
Oh, gosh, I didn't miss that. I missed that.
Pan Am. And TDK.
Oh, wow. Wow.
All just very overtly placed at one point or another on these big billboards or in the backgrounds. So there's definitely product.
So it makes it more believable than if they just made up brands somehow.
It does. And I think it shows you that there's some corporate overlording here in the story world, which I liked, but is also they probably got some money from some of these places. Like the Cuisinart was a peculiar one, I thought.
I do like the idea that TDK is still a thriving business. That
2019.
In the future, we have lifelike robots, but we still have C90 cassettes for you to record your albums onto. Yes. Oh. Well,
I think you could talk about this forever. Yeah.
Oh, there is so much to say about Blade Runner. I did really enjoy it. I think it is. It is a little bit disjointed and it is a bit peculiar, but it is also kind of masterful. It's a pretty remarkable film, and it feels more timely today perhaps than ever. I seem to see an awful lot of YouTube videos about humanoid robots, or have people talking about AI bots which can pass for human. We're going to have AI bots doing all of our customer service in a short while. So this film feels more timely than ever. Before we bring the two films together, though, I am going to force you, while pointing Deckard's blaster at you, I'm going to force you to play Who Am I?
Oh, that's right. We do this, don't we?
Who am I? I'm happy to say I didn't particularly feel like anybody in Mickey 17 this week.
Oh, no, definitely not. That was good.
But I have noticed a bit of a trend that these days I look in the mirror and I see JF Sebastian looking back at me. In my head, I am still 25. But outside of my head, I look about 82. So I think if I'm anybody, I am probably Jeff Sebastian this week. Stuck in my apartment playing with my toys.
Oh, wow.
Did you see anybody that reminded you of yourself this week?
Yeah, I saw myself in the mirror in a character named JF Sebastian. I thought, for a couple of reasons, I'm never going to win a game of chess. I think he loses to Rutger Hauer there. The aging prematurely, I felt that.
You don't have that, though.
Inventing friends to seem more popular than you really are. That's me in a nutshell. And then he's also literally a stepping stone to greater people, it seems. And boy, I've been stepped on a lot over the years. So yeah, he was a relatable character. It's funny that we both settled on that because that doesn't happen very often on TV.
It doesn't happen very often, does it?
Yeah.
What does that say about us? Oh dear.
You can't be Harrison Ford. You can't be Rutger Hauer. Just too cool, I think, and a replicant. I was scared to go with a replicant. So
I can't do acrobatics like Daryl Hannah, and I can't wear my hair like Sean Young. So
exactly,
there was a paucity of choices. Though I do have glasses which are almost as thick as Eldon Terrell's glasses, I could possibly have gone for him, but he's very clever.
You'd think those glasses were big enough to hold his eyes in his head until he squeezed to death. Oh, poor Tyrell.
Right, well, let's play the jingle, see whether we can bring these two disparate but similar films together.
For me, there's this director's take that came back to me a bunch because I remember a little bit the Philip K. Dick book,
right?
And I thought it was good. It's not a masterpiece. And the script in Blade Runner, it's okay. It's not great, as we've mentioned, but Ridley Scott manages to make a decent film, a really good film actually, despite that. Whereas Mickey, I think the script is poor. Too poor. Right. I think Bong Joon Ho can't really make a decent film with that. It's very funny because I think Blade Runner could have been a mess very easily, but I think they distilled the right amounts out of the book as you've explained, and I think he actually makes a good film out of what's probably a mediocre or an average property, and I think Bong Joon Ho just couldn't do that with what he had from the source material. But he wrote the script too, didn't he? I mean, I don't think. Really, so it's his it's his fault. Ultimately, I think you can blame the directors when they do great stuff. We want to credit them, but sometimes you got to blame them for just not maybe choosing the right project or shepherding it very well and cultivating it very well. So that was just on a director level. I don't really talk about like the directors all that much, but this week I wanted to make that a note.
I mean, I wrote here at the top of my list, both of these films, artificial humans, memory implants, corporate control. These two films have sort of taken the same elements and used those elements to tell pretty different stories, to the extent that I got to the end of Blade Runner, I was thinking, God, these two films could actually be set in the same universe. One is on Earth, and Mickey 17 is all off-world. Yes, they could actually even occupy the same kind of, the same story world.
Agreed.
Women do kind of get a bit shortchanged in both pictures. I think the women in Blade Runner probably come off worse. I mean, there are at least there are women who appear in Mickey 17 who have another reason to exist in the film besides sort of taking their clothes off and being looked at by men and then being shot by men. So I mean, the women in Mickey 17, they have a bit of gumption, and they are allowed to do things, not just get shot or be sex objects. But and similarly, so Mickey 17, at least it's pleasingly multicultural, isn't it? It's a kind of a slightly Star Trek-y sort of version of the future, insofar as there are people from all sorts of different backgrounds on that spaceship in Mickey 17, even though Marshall says that he wants to create an all-white planet. Well, he's going about it the wrong way, because there's people from all over the place on that spaceship. Whereas, Blade Runner is not just a bit sexist; it looks a bit racist as well, doesn't it? I think it's got a bit of like 1980s xenophobia, I think, isn't it? I suspect in the 1980s there are a lot of Californians who were worried that Asian people were going to take over with their tricky to read neon signs and their noodle bars and oh dear, yes.
Yeah.
So I wonder whether there is some of that attitude that has managed to suffuse its way into Blade Runner. They do look like films that were made 47 years apart.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Yeah. So for me, I'll do this in air quotes, but that's progress over 40 years. Is that the women characters and the characters of color are getting a little bit better treatment. Not a whole lot, but a little bit better. I kind of liked the dystopian world in Los Angeles and Blade Runner in the sense that you didn't know what languages you needed to speak, and maybe you didn't need any language at all. There's no one reading a book at any point, and I guess Harrison Ford's looking over letters and music and things, but you get the sense that they're both fairly illiterate worlds, which seems to be, for the dystopian vision of the future, that's telling, I think. But I love the fact that, like, Harrison Ford was an outsider in that Los Angeles, right? He couldn't understand who was talking to him. I don't even know what Edward James Olmos was talking. It wasn't Spanish.
I think it says in Future Noir something like it's like some bits of it are I think Chinese or Mandarin or whatever. Some bits of it are Hungarian. I think it's just insane. Yeah.
I liked that touch, though. I thought that was really a good touch. Just kind of lends you again to this uncertainty and lack of logic or lack of progress in this new dystopian world. So it was a nice touch. But yeah, I don't know. It's to a certain extent you're comparing a poor film to a good film, and it's a little hard. It's nice to see, though, in the sense that you can start out with a lot of the same maybe touchstones, but end up at very different places, both in story and in filmmaking.
Yeah. I think maybe both films are sort of trying to ask a similar question. I think they're both trying to ask, what is a person? Or what do you have to do to qualify as a person? And, is that important? So I think they're both sort of trying to wheedle at that notion. But I think Blade Runner is asking the question in a more interesting and mature way.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't think Mickey 17 is quite able to answer the question or even really take much of a shot at answering the question. I think it's just sort of throwing it out there and then failing to address the really interesting notions around that idea.
Yep.
I saw a post on Reddit the other week about a guy who said he was saying, I've been making like $40,000 through AI influencers on Instagram. And I was thinking, oh my God, this is the world that we live in now, that actually human beings who don't exist at all, who are just kind of like utter sort of fiction, computer generated pap, are making a lot more money every month than I am.
Yes.
What does that say about the world that we live in? What is the future going to hold? Yeah. We've sort of created our own replicants here. They're not yet walking around.
Exactly.
And they're not dancing in nightclubs and they're not serving us in shops. But they kind of exist in this sort of virtual, non-existent online world.
Yep.
And they seem to be making money out of it.
Yeah.
What's going to happen next year? The year after? The year after that? The more years that pass, the closer Blade Runner seems to be to reality.
Yeah, well, I think for me, it's all advertising though. Ultimately, like I think they're just, they got a lot of AI is used just to generate content, which is to attract attention to a screen or a product, but ultimately to sell you something. It's just, it'd be interesting if we had robots who could do hard labor for us, and maybe that is coming up soon. But I think as long as people are going to make money doing absolutely nothing, I think that's pretty appealing. So. And they're just trying to sell some product, which eventually, it'll be produced. Most of our products will be produced by robots. And I just don't know what the people are going to do, though, because I think they're just going to be looking at screens and buying crap, right? It's not like...
I think, we're already there, aren't we? I think we are already there.
So I think these are both dystopian and And I love that about the science fiction writers. They're very good at sort of predicting where humans are going in the future. They've got, you're always getting these interesting ideas coming out of the science fiction writers even 60 and 70 years ago. But at the same time, I never see enough of a Luddite protestation of where we're going. What are the solutions? I mean, we all are just resolved, because we've seen this in film after film. We're resolved to this dystopian future for planet and people, and yet you don't see much science fiction that says, this is the real answer. And I think in part it's because the real answer is a very natural, organic answer. It's not a technology answer. It's more a harnessing of technology and using it properly. And people don't want that. They want to sell us crap and buy our attention.
Edward was talking to me the other day about, he was saying he's a little bit worried about the future because of, will AI take all of the jobs?
Yeah.
And I was trying to draw parallels with the French Revolution. I was telling him that I hope, before society disintegrates entirely, people would take it upon themselves to burn down the data centers and smash the internet, and people will eventually draw a line and say this far and no further.
Yeah.
But I hope they will. Maybe we'll all be too distracted watching AI influencers selling us trousers before.
For the meantime, yeah. I think
in the meantime,
it's a very long arc. But I think even Karl Marx did predict that you run through the capitalism, and eventually people are going to go back towards more collective living. And I don't think there's going to be much choice ultimately. There'll be so few people. Maybe it's more possible when the population is smaller due to disease and dystopia. So it's not the immediate forecast is, I'm sorry, Edward, the immediate forecast is not too bright. But eventually your great children might have a really pleasant life, but who knows where we'll be at that point.
When they emerge blinking from that cave, yes. Well, on that cheerful note, don't bother seeing Mickey 17.
Don't. No.
But you can buy Blade Runner from the Apple Store really cheaply, and that's what we would recommend you do. There's just enough time to talk about what else has been playing at this theatre, and I hope it's better than Mickey 17.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So you were telling me before we recorded you watched a film on a bus this week.
I watched a couple, yeah. I paid attention to one. I paid attention to Gravity, which is the Alfonso Cuarón film from, I think, 2013.
Yeah, something like that, right.
That was pretty interesting to see on a bus. Yeah, that's good.
That's like not the most appropriate bus film I can think of, actually.
No, because
Had you seen it before?
I had seen it in the theater when it first came out, and then it's a very repetitive film. It's like they sort of go to one thing that gets blown up, and then they have to meander off to another thing that gets blown up, and then you get to a place, the space station. You get on one capsule that blows up, and then you're going to the Chinese station to do I don't know what, and that blows up, and then finally you just take the capsule back to space, and you basically almost blow up yourself. So. It's definitely a feat of filmmaking. It's look at the Gravity looking wonderful, and you can believe some of the space stuff, but and it wasn't that long. I gotta say, I think it was an hour and a half, maybe an hour and 45 minutes or something. So it was the right length. The one that I want to talk about though is I saw a 16 millimeter print of 8.5, which I hadn't seen in.
Whoa, my God!
This is a film that I've seen probably 3 or 4 times, and it's not short. And at first I was standing up, and then finally a seat came available, so I was able to sit down. I was very happy about that because I was about to walk out. When I first saw that film in my 20s, this is a Federico Fellini film, it seemed more incoherent back then. And it may still be incoherent, but because I'm older and maybe less coherent myself, it just made a lot more sense, and I just loved it. It's just, Fellini makes these beautiful image pictures where he's just a fantastic artist. But this, I didn't realize how personal it was. This is it came back to me. This is very self-critical making. He's making this film about himself, making a film about himself. So you're in this kind of wonderful Fellini warp, and it works really well. It's beautiful. It's fantastically weird. It's wonderful. And again, we were talking about why don't they make pictures like this anymore. I think it's because Fellini's dead. That's why you don't get pictures like this anymore.
That's where he's going wrong.
What was the film Bo? Something was going on with Bo. Bo was not worried. Bo was not nervous. Bo is, remember a couple
Bo's
years
afraid.
Yeah, and I think that film is supposed to be kind of weirdly Fellini-esque, and it's just not. It's actually 8.5 is it's a masterpiece and recognized, I think, justly so. So that was the film that I really wanted to talk about more. But how about yourself? You've been traveling, and maybe you saw a film on a beach or.
Oh, well, if only. We travelled on the cheapest budget airline. On the way over, they say, well, you can pay to join the airline Wi-Fi and watch one of our films. On the way back, there wasn't even that. They didn't even have Wi-Fi on the airplane. Wow. We were forced to look out of the window for entertainment, which wasn't so bad. Before we left, so no movies on our holiday, but we did watch before we left. We watched When Marnie Was There. 2014 Studio Ghibli movie.
Oh, okay.
It's directed by Hiromasa Yonebayashi. Mm-hmm. So he also directed Arrietty, the Borrowers movie. But When Marnie, it's a very sweet, lovely film. It's a supernatural teenage lesbian romance. It's really, really sweet until about 15 minutes before the end of the movie. And then for the last 15 minutes, it takes a really strange left turn.
Ooh, wow.
And you leave the film thinking, wait, what? Does that completely undermines the whole of the rest of the film that I was enjoying so sweetly? What? At the risk of spoiling it, anybody who's planning on watching it, fast forward 20 seconds.
Yeah.
The twist in the last 15 minutes is that it's this really sweet love story between two sort of teenage girls, and then at the end of the movie, it turns out that girl that you were in love with, that's your grandmother who's travelled through time.
Oh my!
Wait, what?
Oh god!
What?
Wow.
So, so it becomes this kind of very weird transgenerational incest story. So I'm not entirely sure how did that happen.
Wow.
But anyway, it's a lovely film. Just don't think too hard about the last quarter of an hour.
Exactly. I won't. I'm trying to get that and Mickey 17 out of my brain right now.
We will quickly do the socials. We're on Blue Sky now, as promised. Come and join us on Blue Sky. I've joined Blue Sky. It seems to be, there seem to be nice people on Blue Sky, but not very many of them. It's quite quiet.
Oh.
We are Two Real Cinema Club at Blue Sky. You can read our blog, tworealcinemaclub.com, or comment on our YouTube channel. We love your comments. Email us, tworealcinemaclub@gmail.com. Next time. So I'm happy to say we are back to our four-legged friends. It's not donkeys next time, but dogs.
Dogs. Finally. Whew. Back to some animals. That's what they needed in Blade Runner, too. They needed the Mercers.
Yes.
Electric or otherwise.
They may or may not be electric animals. We are watching The Friend, the new Bill Murray picture. And we will be comparing it to My Life as a Dog, the Lasse Hallström breakthrough from 1987, something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. So looking forward to that. Four-legged friends, always a joy. Until then, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. See you next time.
Goodbye, everyone.